Ma'am, I need you to come with me. We've received reports of suspicious credit card activity.
I'm just shopping. My card is fine. That's what everyone says. I've been doing this for years. I know what fraud looks like.
Then call the bank and clear it up.
That can wait. Right now, you're coming with me.
Wait, this is a mistake.
Yeah. I don't care where you work. Turn around.
The security camera was already recording when Special Agent Monica Harrington reached for her wallet. 2:47 p.m. on a quiet Tuesday afternoon in March. A decorated Federal Bureau of Investigation agent with 12 years of service was purchasing a birthday gift for her daughter when a mall security supervisor decided her federal credentials were fake. At the Westfield Galleria shopping center in her own jurisdiction, surrounded by stores she'd helped protect during threat assessments, everything she said would be dismissed. Everything she did would be questioned. And everything that happened next was captured on multiple cameras. What this security supervisor didn't know would cost his employer $4.2 million and change. The way security personnel are trained across the entire state. Special Agent Monica Harrington wasn't just any shopper that Tuesday afternoon. At 41 years old, she had spent over a decade with the FBI's Minneapolis field office, specializing in white-collar crime and public corruption investigations. Her personnel file showed commendations from 3 different U.S. attorneys, recognition from the Department of Justice for her work dismantling a multi-state fraud operation, and a spotless service record. She held a top-secret security clearance and had testified before federal grand juries on 17 separate occasions. That March afternoon, she was off duty, dressed in jeans and a casual sweater, enjoying a rare day off to shop for her daughter, Emma's 9th birthday. She'd already visited 3 stores, made 2 purchases, and was heading toward the parking garage with her shopping bags when she decided to make one final stop at an electronics retailer. It was an ordinary errand on an ordinary Tuesday. She had no badge displayed, no weapon visible, nothing to distinguish her from the hundreds of other shoppers moving through the mall that afternoon. But what the security supervisor who was about to approach her didn't know was that Special Agent Harrington's training included de-escalation techniques, constitutional law, and detailed protocols for identifying herself to other law enforcement and security personnel. She knew her rights, she knew proper procedures, and she was about to need every bit of that knowledge. At 2:43 p.m., Mall Security Supervisor Derek Paulson received a radio call from a store loss prevention officer at a jewelry retailer on the 2nd floor. The report was vague. A woman had presented what the loss prevention officer thought looked suspicious. When asked for identification during a high-value purchase, she ultimately decided not to make. The description was generic: black woman, mid-40s, casual clothing, carrying shopping bags. The loss prevention officer hadn't detained her, hadn't asked additional questions, had simply felt something was off about an interaction. That lasted less than 3 minutes. Paulson, a 52-year-old security supervisor with 11 years at the Westfield Galleria and a background in private security, but no law enforcement training, took it upon himself to locate this individual. At 2:47 p.m., he spotted Special Agent Harrington near the electronics store entrance. Without consulting with mall management or reviewing any actual evidence, he approached. "Excuse me, ma'am. I need to see your identification." His tone was immediately authoritative, demanding rather than requesting. Special Agent Harrington turned, slightly surprised but professionally courteous. "Is there a problem, sir? I need to see your ID now." Paulson stepped closer, positioning himself to block her path toward the store entrance. She remained calm, her voice even and measured. "Can you tell me what this is regarding?" "Ma'am, I'm not going to ask again." "Identification, now?" This was already a deviation from standard security protocols. Paulson had no reasonable suspicion of criminal activity, no report of theft or disturbance involving this specific individual, and no legal authority to demand identification from a patron simply walking through a public shopping area. But Special Agent Harrington, trained to de-escalate and knowing that cooperation often resolves misunderstandings quickly, reached into her purse. She withdrew her federal credentials, a leather bifold case containing her FBI badge and official identification card bearing her photograph, full name, badge number, and the seal of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'm Special Agent Monica Harrington with the FBI, she said calmly, holding the credentials at eye level so he could clearly read them. I'm off duty, just shopping. Is there something specific you need to discuss? Paulson barely glanced at the credentials before his expression hardened. Yeah, right, that's fake. The words hung in the air for a moment. Special Agent. Harrington's expression shifted from professional courtesy to confusion. I'm sorry, what? That badge is fake. I've seen real FBI badges, and that's not one of them. Paulson reached for his radio. I need backup at the east corridor, second level. I've got someone with false identification. Sir, I assure you these credentials are genuine. If you'd like to verify, ma'am, stop talking. You're going to come with me to the security office, and we're going to sort this out. He moved to take her arm. She stepped back, maintaining distance, her shopping bag still in her left hand, credentials in her right. I'm not going anywhere until you explain what this is about. You have no authority to detain me. I've identified myself as a federal agent. If you want to verify my credentials, you can call the FBI field office. The number is, I don't need to call anyone. I know a fake badge when I see one. 2 more security officers were approaching now, responding to Paulson's radio call. Shoppers were beginning to slow down, watching the confrontation unfold, but the body cam warned. By one of the responding security officers was capturing something that would later become critical evidence. Special Agent Harrington's federal credentials were clearly visible, legitimate, and properly displayed. The badge bore correct FBI insignia, proper weight and dimensions, and an identification card with security features including holographic elements and microprinting. Any reasonable examination would have confirmed their authenticity within. Seconds dot at 2:51 p.m., 2 additional mall security officers arrived. Thomas Chun, 29, and Rebecca Walsh, 34. Both had attended the same private security training courses as Paulson. Neither had law enforcement backgrounds, and both immediately deferred to their supervisor's assessment of the situation. What's going on? Chun asked, positioning himself on Special Agent Harrington's left side. She's got fake federal credentials. Paulson explained, his voice loud enough that a growing crowd of shoppers had stopped to watch. Probably part of some scam operation. We're taking her to the office. Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time to verify these credentials before this goes any further. Special Agent Harrington's voice remained controlled, but there was an edge now. She was acutely aware of the crowd forming, the cameras, on cell phones beginning to rise, the public humiliation unfolding. Call the Minneapolis FBI field office. Call local police. But you need to verify before you escalate this. Ma'am, you need to comply with our instructions, Walsh said, moving closer. If you resist, we'll have to restrain you. Woman in her 60s pushed through the small crowd that had gathered. Excuse me, I'm watching this whole thing. She showed you her badge. Why are you treating her like a criminal? The witness would later be identified as a retired school teacher who happened to be shopping nearby. Paulson didn't even look at her. Ma'am, step back. This doesn't concern you. She's being cooperative. She showed you identification. This is wrong. Torres held up her cell phone. I'm recording this. Record whatever you want, Paulson snapped. Chun, call the police. We need actual law enforcement here. This was the critical moment that would later be dissected in depositions and trial testimony, rather than using the police call as an opportunity to verify Special Agent Harrington's credentials. Paulson framed the call as requesting assistance, with a suspect who possessed fraudulent federal identification. He made no attempt to have the responding officers verify her identity through official channels before their arrival. Special Agent Harrington made a decision. She carefully placed her shopping bags on the floor and held both hands up, credentials still visible in her right hand. I'm going to cooperate fully, but I want everyone to understand. I am a federal agent. These credentials are genuine, and what's happening right now is unlawful detention. I'm stating clearly for every camera recording this. Save. It for the police, Paulson said. Walsh, stay with her. Make sure she doesn't leave. Over the next 8 minutes, as they waited for police to arrive, the situation became increasingly surreal. Special Agent Harrington stood calmly, her hands visible, making no sudden movements, while 3 security officers surrounded her as if she were a dangerous threat. The crowd grew larger. More cell phones appeared. Margaret Torres continued, recording and providing commentary. This is ridiculous. She's done nothing wrong. She showed her badge. At 2:58 p.m., another witness approached. James Mackenzie, a 47-year-old attorney who worked in an office building adjacent to the mall, had stopped to see what the commotion was about. I am an attorney, he announced to Paulson. What's the legal basis for detaining this woman? She presented false federal credentials. Have you verified they're false? Have you called the FBI to confirm? I don't need to. It's obvious. Mackenzie pulled out his own cell phone and began recording. For the record, you're detaining someone who has presented federal credentials, and you're refusing to verify those credentials through proper channels before involving law enforcement. Paulson's jaw tightened. Sir, I'm going to ask you to step back. What investigators would later discover was that this wasn't a case of a security supervisor making an honest mistake and then correcting course when given additional information. This was a supervisor who had made a snap judgment and then doubled down repeatedly, refusing multiple opportunities to verify the truth, ignoring witness intervention, and escalating a situation that could have been resolved with a simple phone. Call dot at 3:03 p.m., 2 Minneapolis Police Department officers arrived. Officer David Kowalski, a 9-year veteran, and Officer Jennifer Martinez, a 6-year veteran. Both were professional, trained law enforcement with experience in proper identification verification. Paulson immediately approached them. Thanks for coming. We've got a woman here with fake FBI credentials. She's been claiming she's a federal agent. Officer Kowalski looked past Paulson to where Special Agent Harrington stood, still calm, still holding her credentials. Their eyes met, and something in her bearing registered immediately with Kowalski. He'd worked joint task forces before. He knew what federal agents looked like. He walked directly to her, not to Paulson. Ma'am, can I see that identification? She handed it to him without a word. He examined it carefully, turning it to catch the light, checking the holographic features, reading the badge number. His expression shifted. He looked up at her, then back at the credentials, then handed them back. Special Agent Harrington, he said formally, I apologize. For this situation, these credentials are genuine. The relief that washed over her face was visible to everyone watching. But it was immediately replaced by something else. Controlled anger? I told them that, she said quietly, multiple times. I offered to have them verify through official channels. They refused. Officer Martinez had already stepped away and was speaking into her radio, her voice low. Within minutes, a patrol supervisor arrived, then a Minneapolis PD lieutenant. Word was already spreading through law enforcement channels. Mall security had detained an FBI agent and refused to verify her credentials. Despite her repeated requests and witness intervention by 3:30 p.m., Special Agent Harrington was free to leave, but she didn't. She provided a detailed statement to the police supervisor. She requested copies of all security footage. She obtained contact information from both Margaret Torres and James Mackenzie, the witnesses who had intervened. And she made a phone call to her supervisor at the I-Field office. What happened next would unfold over the following weeks and months. Special Agent Harrington filed a formal complaint with the FBI's Civil Rights Division. The Bureau opened an inquiry into the incident, not as a criminal matter initially, but as a potential violation of federal regulations regarding interference with federal officers. The mall's security footage was preserved under federal subpoena. The The bodycam footage from the security officers was obtained. Cell phone footage from witnesses went viral on social media within hours. But this wasn't the full story. As FBI investigators began reviewing the security company's practices and training protocols, a disturbing pattern emerged. The company that employed Paulson, Chun, and Walsh Sentinel Security Solutions, a private firm contracted by Westfield Galleria, had a troubling history. Internal records obtained during discovery showed that over the previous 8 years, Sentinel Security Solutions had received 43 formal complaints regarding racial profiling, excessive use of authority, and unlawful detentions. Of those 43 complaints, 31 involved Black or Hispanic individuals who were stopped, questioned, or detained without reasonable suspicion. 17 of those complaints involved demands for identification from shoppers who were simply walking through the mall, engaged in no suspicious activity whatsoever. Derek Paulson himself had been named in 8 previous complaints. In 2018, he detained a college student for 40 minutes, insisting her student ID was fraudulent because it didn't look right, only to have university police confirm it was genuine. In 2019, he'd accused a man of trespassing in the mall, despite the man having just purchased $300 worth of merchandise and carrying store receipts. In 2021, he'd called police on a woman he claimed was acting suspicious when she was actually a plainclothes police detective from a neighboring jurisdiction shopping on her day off. None of these incidents had resulted in formal discipline. Beyond brief written warnings, supervisors at Sentinel Security Solutions had been made aware of Paulson's pattern of behavior, but had taken no meaningful corrective action. Training records showed that security officers received minimal instruction on constitutional rights, proper identification verification, or de-escalation techniques. The company's policies contained no clear protocol for what to do when someone presented federal, state, or local law enforcement credentials. Mall management at Westfield Galleria had been copied on several of the complaints, but had deferred to Sentinel Security Solutions to handle internal discipline. There was no oversight, no accountability structure, and no consequences for repeated violations of shoppers' civil rights. The FBI investigation expanded. Federal investigators interviewed former Sentinel security employees, reviewed years of incident reports, and analyzed patterns of stops and detentions. The data was damning. Black shoppers were 4.7 times more likely to be stopped for identification checks than white shoppers. Hispanic shoppers were 3.2 times more likely. These disparities existed even when controlling for time of day, location, within the mall, and type of merchandise being carried. But the consequences were far from over. As news of the incident spread through law enforcement communities, other victims began coming forward. On June 15th, 3 months after the incident, Special Agent Monica Harrington filed a federal civil rights lawsuit in the United States District Court for the District of Minnesota. The complaint named Derek Paulson individually, Sentinel Security Solutions as his employer, and Westfield Galleria as the property owner that had contracted with Sentinel and failed to oversee security operations adequately. The lawsuit alleged violations of her Fourth Amendment rights against unlawful seizure, violations of her 14th Amendment rights to equal protection, intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation, and civil conspiracy. The complaint detailed not only her specific detention, but also the broader pattern of misconduct that had been allowed to continue unchecked for years. Her legal team, led by civil rights attorney Marcus Washington of the Washington and Associates firm, assembled a comprehensive evidence package. They had the mall security footage showing the entire encounter from multiple angles. They had the body cam footage from security officers. They had cell phone video from Margaret Torres and James McKenzie. They had statements from 17 witnesses who had observed the confrontation. They had internal Sentinel Security Solutions documents showing Paulson's complaint history. They had training records demonstrating the company's inadequate policies. During the discovery phase, Depositions revealed stunning admissions. Derek Paulson testified that he just knew the credentials were fake based on gut instinct, and that he had never actually examined them closely. When asked if he knew what genuine FBI credentials looked like, he admitted he did not. When asked why he refused to call the FBI field office to verify, he stated he didn't think it was necessary. Thomas Cheen and Rebecca Walsh both testified that they had deferred entirely to Paulson's judgment, never independently examining the credentials themselves. Neither could identify any specific feature of the credentials that appeared fraudulent. Both admitted they had received no training on how to verify law enforcement identification. Sentinel Security Solutions. Executives testified that the company had no written protocol for verifying federal, state, or local law enforcement credentials. They acknowledged receiving complaints about Paulson, but insisted his behavior had never risen to a level warranting termination. When pressed on what level would warrant termination, they could not provide a clear answer. Westfield Galleria management testified that they had trusted Sentinel Security Solutions to handle security matters appropriately and had not conducted independent oversight of security operations or complaint patterns. They could not produce evidence of any quality control reviews or audits of security practices. As the case progressed toward trial, the defendant's legal position deteriorated, media coverage intensified. Civil rights organizations filed amicus briefs supporting Special Agent Harrington's claims. The Department of Justice opened its own investigation into whether Sentinel Security Solutions practices constituted a pattern and practice of civil rights violations requiring federal intervention. On February 8th, 10 months after the incident, the parties entered settlement negotiations. The liability evidence was overwhelming. The pattern of misconduct was documented. The damages, both economic and non-economic, were substantial. Special Agent Harrington had suffered public humiliation, emotional distress, and professional embarrassment. She had incurred legal fees and had spent countless hours on depositions and case preparation. Her reputation had been questioned publicly, requiring statements from the FBI to confirm her status and credentials. On March 22nd, the settlement was announced. Sentinel Security Solutions and Westfield Galleria agreed to pay Special Agent Monica Harrington $4.2 million in a confidential settlement. While the specific allocation between defendants was not disclosed, the total amount sent a clear message about the severity of the violation and the defendants' exposure at trial, but the financial settlement was only part of the resolution. As a condition of settlement, Sentinel Security Solutions agreed to terminate Derek Paulson immediately. He would never work in security again under the company's employment. Thomas Chen and Rebecca Walsh were required to complete 40 hours of civil rights training and were placed on probationary status. More significantly, Sentinel Security Solutions agreed to comprehensive reforms. All security officers would receive mandatory training on constitutional rights, including Fourth Amendment protections against unlawful seizure and proper identification verification procedures. The company would implement a new protocol requiring supervisors to verify law enforcement credentials through official channels before detaining or questioning anyone presenting federal, state, or local identification. An independent civil rights compliance officer would be appointed to review all complaints of racial profiling or unlawful detention. Quarterly audits would analyze patterns of stops and detentions by race, ethnicity, age, and other demographic factors to identify potential bias. Any security officer receiving 3 substantiated complaints within a 2-year period. Westfield Galleria agreed to similar oversight provisions, including hiring an independent security consultant to review and approve all security policies before implementation, conducting annual reviews of security contractor performance, and establishing a direct complaint line for shoppers to report security misconduct. On April 10th, Derek Paulson was charged by the Hennepin County Attorney's Office with misdemeanor false imprisonment. While not a federal charge, it represented criminal accountability for his actions. He ultimately pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 90 days in county jail, suspended pending completion of 200 hours of community service and 2 years of probation. The reforms mandated by the settlement became a model for shopping centers across Minnesota and eventually spread to other states. The Minnesota Retail Association adopted recommended best practices based on the settlement terms. Legislation was introduced in the state legislature requiring mandatory civil rights training for all private security personnel operating in public-facing roles. In a statement released through her attorney after the settlement was finalized, Special Agent Monica Harrington said, "This was never about the money. This was about accountability and ensuring that what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else. If a federal agent with credentials can be treated this way, what happens to ordinary citizens who don't have the resources or knowledge to fight back? We have to demand better." The FBI issued its own statement commending Special Agent Harrington's professionalism during the incident and emphasizing that its agents expect to be treated with respect, but also understand they must be accountable to the same constitutional principles they enforce. The broader implications of this case extend far beyond one shopping mall or one security company. Private security officers operate in a legal gray area. They have more authority than ordinary citizens, but far less training and accountability than sworn law enforcement. They operate under the color of authority, wearing uniforms, carrying badges, and detaining people. Yet they are not subject to the same constitutional constraints or oversight mechanisms that govern police. This case exposed how that gap can lead to civil rights violations. Racial profiling and unlawful detentions with no consequences until someone with resources and knowledge pushes back. How many others were stopped, questioned, humiliated, and sent on their way without recourse? How many didn't have the credentials, the training, the witnesses, or the cameras to prove what happened to them? The settlements and reforms represent progress, but they also reveal systemic failures. It took a federal agent being detained, refusing to back down, and pursuing the case through federal court to force changes that should have been standard practice all along. It took $4.2 million in liability exposure to motivate companies to implement basic constitutional training and oversight. If this can happen to a decorated FBI agent with 12 years of service, a top secret clearance, and unambiguous federal credentials, what does that mean for everyone else? What does it say about how we train, supervise, and hold accountable those we grant authority over public spaces? These are uncomfortable questions, but they are necessary ones. This case became a turning point not because it was unique, but because it was documented, witnessed, and pursued. The cameras were rolling. The witnesses stood up. The victim had the knowledge and resources to fight back. And the system, eventually, worked. But justice delayed and justice requiring extraordinary effort is not true justice. Real accountability means preventing these incidents before they happen, not just compensating victims afterward. Have you ever witnessed something like this in your community? Have you seen security personnel or law enforcement overstep their authority? Have you experienced or observed profiling, unlawful detention, or harassment in public spaces? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. These conversations matter. Your stories matter. And accountability begins with awareness. Special Agent Monica Harrington returned to duty and continues to serve with distinction. Derek Paulson no longer works in security. The reforms continue to spread. And somewhere in Minneapolis, the cameras at Westfield Galleria are still recording. But now the people behind those cameras have been trained to recognize that a badge is more than just something to doubt. It's something to verify, something to respect, and something that represents authority that must be exercised with wisdom, restraint, and accountability. This is the story of how one unlawful detention led to $4.2 million in damages and meaningful reform. But more importantly, it's a story about standing up for your rights, demanding accountability, and refusing to accept injustice even when everyone around you insists you should just comply and move on.